for tuning in to Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin from the gun store in Las Vegas. This program is all about guns, politics, and self-defense. We have a couple of panels on this show that will talk about using warning shots to fend away an intruder would be the easiest way to say it. And
That's polite.
a shooting in Arkansas in the middle of a shopping mall with off-duty cops involved and armed civilians that had CCWs and a bad guy who's firing in the middle of a shopping mall, which came out really well considering what could have gone wrong. First, we need to talk about this first case. And this is kind of from my file where I start out by saying I couldn't possibly make this up. A homeowner in Washington State is annoyed because paragliders are flying across basically his front yard from the local paragliding club.
So he complained to said paragliding club, and he got no solution offered because he'd had enough of the trespassing, as he called it, with these paragliders floating above his property. I believe they hovered anywhere from like 60 to 80 feet above his yard, but it was at like an airway. I don't know what is like a paraglider's like the airspace.
Track.
The airspace was above his yard.
So he looks out his window and he sees his paragliding slowly floating by his front door. He goes out, yells at the guy, The guy, no response at that time. So now he's really mad. He goes back in the house, and out comes Mr. Double Barrel.
And so he's after. Apparently, this was the straw that broke the camel's back because he fired a couple shots, not at the paraglider, but in the air and away from the guy to. In his words, to get his attention, which I'm sure that he did.
Well, obviously the verbalness didn't get his attention enough, so he gets something a little louder.
Possibly this guy went to the Joe Biden school of defending your home, where you fire shotgun rounds in the air to scare away the bad guys. It didn't work. The paraglider, of course, when he landed, called the police, and the police came and ultimately arrested him, the homeowner, for unlawfully displaying a weapon.
Now, this guy's an intruder, but not really an intruder in the strictest sense of the word. He wasn't on the guy's property. There's an arcane legal concept about, the cylinder of space above your dwelling. You kind of possess that and control it in quiet use and enjoyment. Could be. Obviously, he's reacting to this homeowner's warning shots by yelling back and cussing him out. Being charged with an unlawful display of weapon ultimately was because they determined it probably wasn't assault with a deadly weapon, because even the guy in the paraglider said, well, he shot the other direction. So what do you do with that other than there's a guy on the ground yelling at you, holding a shotgun, and the guy in the air 60, 80 feet up has a little fear going on, and he feels that this is untoward?
Well, he goes on trial, the homeowner does, on a charge that could land him a year in jail and a $5,000 fine. The jury asked the judge if they all had to come to a group consensus, and the judge said yes. So they come back and they deliberate more. Not guilty.
So, legally we're looking at this and going, did he actually display a firearm? Well, yeah. This is maybe jury nullification. They understand this guy is mad that people drift by his house. And we've got a legal issue, obviously, of is this trespassing when you're 70 feet off the ground?
Well, it could be trespassing under, like I said, there's an old arcane theory that you own everything above your house and below your house. That stuff has been kind of taken away in the age of airplanes, and airports had to fly over people's property. So the question was how high? I don't know, 60, 80 feet might be a problem if this guy's got private property you don't want.
I have no problem with that because I own some lakefront property back in upstate New York. And
you do a lot of nude sunbathing there.
Oh, yeah. Sea-Doo, them Sea-Doos, I mean, in the morning, back and forth and back and forth. I can see how this guy could get frustrated. I really
Well,
could.
if
know.
there
Do you
are
own a
any
shotgun?
Several. I have restrained myself, though.
If there are any birds or kites or model airplanes watching, please stay out of everyone's yard because you're just going to get shut down.
Ultimately, I think what happened here is unlawful display of a weapon requires a specific intent to do something unlawfully, because I'm sure just standing in your backyard with a shotgun isn't illegal even there. And shooting on his property may very well have been legal. And so the jury simply came and said what he did may have been bothersome, but it wasn't illegal or unlawful under the circumstances. Now, if he'd pointed the firearm at the guy, probably an assault with a deadly weapon charge, probably a different outcome.
There would be. He didn't point it at the guy, and which is good. And actually, the attorneys and the judge agreed at the end of this case that it really need to refer it to the state legislature to see if there really is a charge there. So, for now, in Washington, don't shoot at paragliders.
Maybe just don't paraglide.
We'll be back right after this.
Our panel discussion will continue right after this. Hi, it's Emily, and I'm coming to you from the Shotgun Wedding Chapel here at the Gun Store in Las Vegas, where you can book your shotgun wedding ceremony, vow renewal, or commitment ceremony. You're watching Fired Up with Bob Irwin.
We are back. This next panel discussion is one that really flies into the face of what you hear from the anti-gun crowd, that CCW holders are dangerous to other people because you never know what they're going to do, and they're going to fire their guns in crowds and hit all the wrong people. And in this case, we had a really complicated shooting where you had off-duty officers involved and CCW holders involved, and it worked out actually really well because everybody's really very safe.
Except for the bad guy.
Except for the bad guy.
Well, setting the stage here, we have an estranged husband coming to a shopping mall plaza in search of his, well, soon-to-be ex-wife. After this, they probably didn't stay together. There were threats from him against her, so she was actually escorted by two friends of hers that were CCW holders, so they actually had their permits.
And the husband sees the wife with these two guys and pulls up his shirt attempting to draw his pistol. However, the two guys that were with the wife, both CCW holders, they pull out their guns, and in a very short gunfight, one of the CCW holders is hit, and the husband is hit multiple times.
Now, there are two separate off-duty police officers in the mall that hear the shooting, and they come running. Now, they're in plain clothes, but they have their badges, and they come running, I assume with firearms drawn. The husband is down with wounds to the chest. The two CCW holders immediately comply with the commands of these off-duty officers who displayed their credentials. They set their firearms down, and they did everything exactly right. They complied with the officers' commands. No one goes to shooting the other guy with a gun.
In fact, no one else was hit. So no one else is hit, no one else is injured. The attacker is dead at the scene, and one of the CCW fellows was hit though, and he was transported, but is expected to be okay. But other than that, I mean, we're talking about firing discipline. We're talking about the cops doing what they were supposed to do, identifying themselves before they started opening fire. And the only casualty here is the bad guy.
And the reason I brought this up, you will never see this in the mainstream media. That here we have two CCW holders, they're guarding this woman basically because of the threats from her husband. He shows up, pulls a gun, fires, they fire back, they killed him. He only hit one of them. None of the rounds from anybody hit anybody. And the biggest issue is here, of course, now the police intervene, and the CCW holders did whatever their instructor, the same thing we tell them to do. Policeman approaches, shows you his ID, gun on the ground, show him your hands. They got handcuffed for about a 5-minute period while they determined who they were and who the bad guy was. The one guy goes to the morgue, the CCW holder got patched up. Everybody wins. perfect shooting, crowd of people running all over the place, nobody got shot that shouldn't have got shot, other than our one defensive guy. It's perfect. But you did not see that on CBS News last night or on Fox 5 even.
Well, and it flies in the face, as you said, of everything the anti-gun people say. Oh, you can't carry because the cops won't know who the bad guys are. You can't carry because the other CCW people, and I'm going to go out on a limb and tell you, there was probably more than one other CCW carrier in this mall. Okay, and in Arkansas. And they didn't come running and just start blasting anybody, because contrary to what the anti-gun people want everyone else to believe, those who go to the time and effort and expense of training and getting a CCW take it seriously. We understand the level of power we carry around. We understand the obligation to ourselves and others that we carry around, and take it, completely and totally.
And it would just justify what Wayne LaPierre said after Sandy Hook. The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
Well, think of what the headlines would have been had this not worked out the way it did. If the suspect, now we're talking about a woman who has already been threatened by her husband.
She's got a
right?
TPO, certainly.
And if this guy had come in and she had not been had the guardians that she had, and he had killed her and the other two guys guarding her because they didn't have weapons, this would have been all over the news as another crazed gun shooting, instead of the way it did work out and lauding good people for doing the right thing.
Absolutely true. And they would never hesitate to gloss over the fact that the man who was trying to kill her started off committing crimes before he even got to the mall. And it didn't slow him down at all. And the only thing that slowed him down, as Tony says, a good guy, or two good guys in this case, with firearms, stopped a bad guy with a gun.
Yeah, and this guy is carrying illegally. I knowing nothing about his background, other than he has a restraining order issued, means he can't be carrying a gun. Right. And a judge thought he was dangerous enough to issue that. So obviously she thought he was dangerous, and turns out she was right. But the TPO obviously didn't have a temporary protective order, did obviously not have any effect on him, because he's going to come up and attempt to murder her anyway, and certainly would have. So perfect handling, perfect shooting, other than one good guy getting hit, and he's okay. God bless you, good job. This is in Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Did you miss the show this week? Don't worry. Check us out on our YouTube channel, Fired Up with Bob Irwin.
Hi, I'm Mason, coming to you from one of the VIP ranges here at the gun store in Las Vegas. And you're watching Fired Up with Bob Irwin.
Let's talk about safeties. Firearm safeties are there for a reason. You want to use them. If you're going to carry around in the chamber, it's essential that you understand how your safeties work. A lot of guns these days have the classic 3-position safety. All the way to the rear, guns cocked, will not fire, even if I inadvertently pull the trigger. The second position, position number 2, allows me to unload the gun. I can work the bolt freely, which I couldn't in the first position, but I can't press the trigger. It's locked out, the safety is on. When the bolt's closed and the safety's all the way forward, it's now ready to fire. And I always have those options to exercise. Until I've actually got my sights on the target, I've identified it, I've identified that the background is clear, that safety's going to be on. Practice with that, get yourself some snap caps, some dummy rounds, and understand how the gun works. Another type of safety system, it's old school as heck, is the lever action. On the lever actions, the classic ones had a half cock position. Still considered the best way to use a lever gun. If you're going to use half cock, it's necessary to put the gun in the firing position first, release the trigger, then your finger comes all the way off the trigger, and you ease it into the half cock position. Pretty good reason not to carry around in the chamber on this rifle. It's real quick to put one in there. It's now ready to go. I can put it in half cock again if I have to release it. I also want to know how that works. Many of these have a cross bolt safety, the newer versions. Cross bolt safeties aren't real popular because they're very, very easy to take it off safety when you think it is. So go with a half cock on your lever gun and you'll be covered. Practice doing that, be able to put it into position without having your finger on the trigger. Oftentimes safeties occur in different places. On the guns, on this one it's right on the stock. Very convenient because I don't have to change my firing position. This is also a 3-position safety. It allows me to do that. Now when I go to unload this gun, it's really important that I understand the mechanism and how it works so that I can make sure that I have a clear chamber and don't inadvertently put one back in the chamber. This gun's a little different. It doesn't have the removable magazine, but it does have a releasing floor plate. Was there ammunition in there, it would release. Now when I take it off safety and put it in that middle position, I could open it up, make sure that there's not a round. Were there one in the chamber, it would extract by pulling the bolt to the rear. I'm operating the gun in the safest mode at all times. Back in there, it goes back on full safe. Unloading lever action guns, depending on the manufacturer. Most popular way is to work the lever and empty the gun. You're preparing it to fire at every opportunity. On the Marlin style guns like this, you can release the ammunition from its locked position and only have to work the lever with the round in the chamber. Now when I do the check, I can check the chamber. I'm going to do that visually and physically. Then I'm going to check the area that holds the magazine here and check it and make sure that there's nothing left in there. I can always work the action again, but I've removed the majority of the ammunition without having it in a firing state.
Did you miss the show this week? Don't worry, check us out on our YouTube channel, Fired Up with Bob Irwin.
The legal basis for using deadly force against another person is fear. The real question is, how much fear? Generally speaking, one must articulate a fear of death or, in most jurisdictions at a minimum, great bodily injury to justify using deadly force. In Nevada, the legislature addressed the issue of fear in our laws by saying bare fear is not enough, and only reasonable fear entitles an individual to use deadly force to protect yourself or others. What is reasonable fear? The law says it is that level of fear that would make a reasonable person in the shooter's situation believe that they had to use the deadly force. This is one of the reasons that it is important to obtain training and continue to do so, especially if you carry a firearm on a daily basis. Why would that make a difference? Because shooting in a home tends to come with the presumption of reasonable fear. It is the one place you should always feel safe, and if another person forcibly enters your home, especially in the quiet or the dead of the night, it is fairly close to the textbook definition of what would create reasonable fear in a person. But outside of the home, what is reasonable may become a little broader. In short, you cannot shoot another person just to make them go away or because they offended you. You also cannot shoot a person who is fleeing at the time because they are no longer a reasonable threat. For a fear to be reasonable, you must be certain that it is the kind of fear that another person would find to cause them to use deadly force. Make sure that you understand what the laws in your jurisdiction require before using deadly force to protect yourself.
Hi, I'm Tony D from the Gun Store here in Las Vegas. Today we're going to be talking about a very, very historical firearm that I'm sure all of you will recognize, the German Luger. This particular model is what they call a Black Widow. It was made in 1941 by Mauser, which is a 41-42. 42 was the code for Mauser during the Nazi regime, the number code, and the year was 1941. This was called a Black Widow because it had the black plastic grips, and a lot of the parts on it, like the magazine release, the trigger, and the safety, and the screws, used to be a very like a straw color, what they call a straw color. And with these later ones, to save time, they just blued them. This one here was is called the Black Widow, obviously because it's all black. But the Lugers started way back in 1900. These were the first ones that came across, and they were made for several branches of the military. This is a 4-inch one. They made an 8-inch, what they call it, or a 6-inch naval model, and then they made an 8-inch artillery model, and they were all fitted with a shoulder stock, or could be fitted with a shoulder stock, so you can use it as a rifle. The artillery model was made for the artillery crews, where they wouldn't issue them rifles, they would issue them the Luger with a shoulder stock. The Navy ones, we had a sight back here, an adjustable sight back here, and the artillery ones had a regular leaf sight like the military. Our government tested the Luger against the 1911, and it turned out that the Luger was very finely fitted, very well manufactured. It's a beautiful piece of machinery, and it was a little bit too fussy for the Americans, so we went with the Colt 45. There were, however, a couple test Lugers made in .45 caliber, and they're very rare and very expensive. One of them was destroyed during testing, and the other one is still in existence. This one here is fired a 9mm parabellum. That's what we call the 9mm Luger caliber. This is what it started from. The actual European is 9x19. That means that the case is 9mm in diameter, the bullet, and the case is 19mm long. In Europe, if you went and asked for a box of 9mm Luger, they wouldn't know what you were talking about. So it's a 9mm parabellum, which means for war, or 9x19. It has a very unique action. It's a toggle action. You have to pull it up in order to charge it. It had a loaded indicator. When the round was in a chamber, a little thing would pop up and say Geladen on it, which meant loaded. And over here is the Gerschheit, which is the German word for safe or safety. The designation for the German military was P08, and that's what this one is stamped on the side. Very expensive nowadays. This one here, 41, 42, would go for about $3,000, so they're really up there in price. But they are a pleasant gun to shoot. They are a naturally aiming gun. The angle of the grip to the relationship of the barrel is just comfortable. It's very, very pleasant to shoot. Magazine, we're only going to shoot 4 rounds in this. Insert it, and then you have to charge it. You have to take these 2 knobs, pull them back, and let go. Little loaded indicator comes up, and like I said, you can read Geladen on the side of it. We're going to shoot 4 rounds out of it, and it is a very pleasant gun. Toggle stays open on the last shot.
Thanks for watching Fired Up with Bob Irwin, coming to you from the gun store in Las Vegas. We'll see you next week. Check us out online at our webpage, firedupwithbobirwin.com.